The week of December 23rd holds the tension of a new year and a new era emerging, for we are at the end of 2024. And the astrology of 2025, as I've talked about, signifies massive change, both on collective as well as personal levels. There's many reasons for this, but one of the chief reasons is the fact of Neptune leaving Pisces to enter Aries, Saturn leaving Pisces to enter Aries, Uranus leaving Taurus to enter Gemini, and Neptune, Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto in Aquarius all forming harmonious, supportive aspects with one another that will bring about big changes that are hard to even predict or fully understand right now. So, in this week of December 23rd, we are on the precipice of crossing this threshold. And this week has a waning moon heading towards a new moon that's going to come on December 30th next week. So, interestingly, we end this year with a new moon that will help give us even more of a feeling of being initiated into a new calendar year. And part of the great changes coming are being exacerbated by this opposition forming this week between Mars retrograde in Leo and Pluto in Aquarius. And this week, while we've already been adjusting to it recently, and we've already been having feelings of frustration, perhaps about what's not working or what we want to have different in our lives, we are going to get a deeper sense of some of that inner desire and change emerging from within this week because of Mars moving within 3 degrees of an opposition with Pluto. The opposition between Mars retrograde and Pluto will become exact on January 2nd, next week. But that tension and friction of their opposition, this could relate to power struggles with you and other people, or a sense of greater empowerment that you want to take on in your life. There might be things about your life you feel like you need to let go of and release. This can be scary when we're used to things being a certain way and we don't want things to change. These cycles coming in next year are going to be so enormous with the change they bring that we're only right now really at the first layer of beginning to sense what those changes are going to be. But the building intensity between Mars and Pluto is not the only reason we are feeling tension of change this week. It's also because of the Jupiter and Saturn cycle reaching a critical phase of their cycle. This is a 20-year cycle that relates to much larger collective changes and trends. And so, as they come into an exact square aspect this week, we are getting much larger insights and revelations about how these more inner personal changes we're starting to feel about ourselves are related to much larger changes going on into the world. And so there is a lot to unpack and look at this week. And so let's get into it. So Monday, December 23rd has one of the more harmonious aspects of the week, which is this grand air trine, this air triangle formed between the moon in Libra with Jupiter in Gemini and Venus in Aquarius. This can be very helpful for gaining clarity related to any of the recent inner changes you've been feeling. It could be helpful with having conversations with important relationships in your life, or also just doing some inner visioning and cohesion and coherence regarding the inner changes that are you're feeling that are going on, perhaps doing journaling or just writing out ideas. And if you are somebody celebrating the holidays, if you're whether you're traveling or welcoming friends or family to your home for one reason or another, this is also great for just social interactions and letting off some steam and having some good time. Now, at the same time, this opposition, as you can see here, between Mars and Pluto is starting to get a little bit closer. And that's something, like I said, that will be continuing to go on underneath everything else as the week progresses. And then the next day, on Tuesday, December 24th, is when we get this square aspect between Jupiter and Saturn. The square aspect forming between Jupiter and Saturn right now goes back to the conjunction 4 years ago in the first degree of Aquarius at the end of 2020. This was a hugely significant conjunction because it locked us into this air era of Jupiter and Saturn only forming conjunctions in air signs for the next couple centuries. And we can feel how this is certainly the case with all the flux and changes and new technology and the way communication has been changing. And especially the way these old, stable, more secure Earth structures related to that old Earth cycle of Jupiter and Saturn are breaking up and fragmenting. And we're having to find our way and be more flexible and adapt. And so, since that conjunction, Jupiter moved through Taurus in 2023 and formed a sextile with Saturn. But it's been this year in 2024 that we've hit that critical phase of the square. When we think about the lunar cycle, this is very much like that first quarter moon square where the moon is half light and half dark. And we have a sense now what the new meaning of the cycle is. And we're really having to persevere and be resilient and push ourselves forward with whatever growth is happening. But because we're talking about Jupiter and Saturn, it's not all about growth. There might be ways we're having to face limitations. We're having to cut back right now. We're having to let go of certain things. So there's all sorts of different ways you could be experiencing this, but it definitely does at the same time involve growth and thinking about how do you want to grow into the changes of this next year. Now, it is important to realize that while this will be the final square between Jupiter in Gemini and Saturn in Pisces, it's not the final square aspect they will form. There will be one more happening in June once Jupiter is in Cancer and Saturn is in Aries. And so this is another reason why a lot of the changes going on right now are very liminal. We feel this tension of things changing, but there's so much more of the story to come. And so much is going to be happening between now and June. So again, just keep in mind, we're just in one phase of this bigger changes going on right now. So hopefully that will help you put into context if there are some things that are frustrating or you're just worried about right now. Now, this Jupiter and Saturn cycle, if you want to think about previous times we've had it, one of the things that's really interesting about their cycle and the way it defines large collective trends and big societal shifts is that for a long time now, they've been lining up with the decades in which we'll get a conjunction at the beginning of a decade. And then at the next decade, we'll get an opposition. And then the next decade, we'll get a conjunction again. So they've helped define this sense of, the 1960s when we had a conjunction, and then the 1970s following the opposition, and then the 1980s when there was a conjunction. So there was a conjunction between them, three of them in Libra between 1980 and 1981. If you remember back to that period of time, it was in 1986 that we reached this same critical phase of the waxing square. Then in the beginning of the 90s, we came into the opposition, and then that cycle ended and a new one began in 2000 in Taurus. Now, with this Taurus cycle that went from 2000 until 2020, we reached the same phase we're in now at the end of 2005 and then during 2006. So one of the things that we can think about, societally, a lot of this internet and all these internet companies and apps that have so much power right now, a lot of that was really developed within this 2000 to 2020 cycle. And as at the end of the 90s, we had that big dot-com bubble that bursted in 2000. Between some of the difficulties with some of those internet advancements and companies forming around that conjunction in 2000, by the time we got to 2005 and 2006, there was a lot of adjustment, and a lot of the companies now that are so powerful were really forming and coming into stronger building phases during that period. And, we can also think about how social media really started coming in a lot more strongly after that first waxing square of that cycle. Thinking about my own personal life, when the conjunction happened in 2000, I was in a period of having a family starting. My wife was pregnant with our first daughter, and I was working and trying to support us and make as much money as I could during this time period. But I was also not happy or finding the work I was doing very meaningfully. So as we approached this square phase, I decided to go back to school and I got a Master of Teaching degree. And so when that first waxing square hit at the end of 2005, I was coming out of that program and getting my first teaching job. So for me, for example, this period was trying to find this meaningful career for me. And so you may have done something similar since 2020. And so also similar to me at that point, you're now at this phase where now it's time to do something and take action. So for me at that time, it was now I am a teacher. I'm going to teach professionally, and I did teach in various community colleges. And so with this cycle, whatever was starting for you in 2020, now we're hitting this critical phase. So whatever you've been working on, now it's a time to really be putting it into action, finding out what's going to work, what needs to change, what needs to be adjusted. And so again, we have one more of these squares coming in June. So it's not the end of the story right now, but it's part of the reason why we can feel that there's so much enormous change going on in the world right now, and how we are ourselves are also really feeling that change very intensely. And part of the reason we can feel this change so intensely is that Mars Pluto opposition that I spoke about. And so the next day on December 25th, which is Christmas, if you're somebody that celebrates Christmas, there is a very big activation of this Mars Pluto opposition because the moon will move into Scorpio and set it off. So that doesn't mean Christmas is ruined and everything's going to go terribly, but just keep that in mind if you are somebody that's around family and, just not to try to provoke needless conflicts and confrontations. And if there's things that go on that you can just kind of let go of, go ahead and do that. And also keep in mind if you just have some anger or just frustrations come up, this is just a temporary transit, and try to find some way to get some sort of insight about that. That frustration or anger might be giving you some information about the changes that you really want to make in your life. And this will be something you'll be continuing to get more and more information about. And so on December 25th, it will be around 10:45 or so in the morning in Pacific time, so you can adjust that for your time zone. This is a time period where the moon will move from being in a square aspect with Pluto into a square aspect with Mars. I mean, one thing about this is the moon is in the sign of Mars, so there's some reception there, but this could definitely be something that could be frustrating. And the moon will then at least be moving away from Mars, heading towards a trine with Saturn and more immediately into a sextile with the sun. But again, just keep that in mind. And you could just have some very unimportant frustrations that go on here. But again, there might be ways that things that, if this is catalytic in some way, it might be putting you in touch with some bigger parts of the process that are unfolding right now. And then the next day on December 26th, the moon will still be in Scorpio and heading towards an opposition with Uranus, which once again could just be some transitory, temporary events, but some things that go on might also give you more insight and revelations about the bigger picture of change coming in here. And the reason that's even more so the case is because of the movement of Mercury on this day. Mercury will move into that square aspect between Jupiter and Saturn, so that Mercury forms an opposition with Jupiter and Gemini and a square aspect with Saturn. Now, this opposition between Mercury and Jupiter has mutual reception because Jupiter's in the sign of Mercury and Mercury's in the sign of Jupiter. So this could be very, very helpful And what's particularly important about this aspect is that Mercury is no longer retrograde, is moving direct, and is reaching its maximum elongation phase, which means Mercury is starting to speed up here. And so, whatever bigger changes have been going on for you related to that Mercury retrograde period in November and December, there can be a lot more clarity for that here and a lot more ideas coming in about how to really start moving more and making some of the changes that you want to make in your life. And so, this opposition between Mercury and Jupiter that has mutual reception is very important because it is the third time it will have happened. The first one was back on November 18th when Mercury was direct. There was another one on December 4th when Mercury was retrograde. And now Mercury is moving direct back through that opposition again. So when we have these three-part aspects, there's often a story that takes place over the course of them. And by the time we get to the end of it, we have a much better sense of not necessarily complete resolution, but we're just understanding things a lot better. And we're able to start implementing more productive changes and shifts and so forth. And so it's not just though that Mercury Jupiter opposition, it's also the Mercury square with Saturn. They came together for the first time on November 12th. Then they came together again on December 6th when Mercury was retrograde. So December 26th is also their third and final time. And so this is really an important phase that's coming in here. And really, the rest of the week is all about these exact same aspects that I've already talked about. Now, on Friday, the moon will still be in Scorpio in the morning, and then it will move into Sagittarius. But the combination of that Mars and Pluto getting closer and closer, like here, they're about 3 degrees away, and especially Mercury activating this Jupiter Saturn cycle is so big that really, as the moon is waning, we're just going to be kind of taking in whatever information we're getting. And this is all going to be part of this new lunar cycle coming in at the end of 2024. Now, later in the day on Friday, which is around 2:46 p.m. in Pacific time, so it's like 5:46 in Eastern time, the moon will move into Sagittarius, which is going to get us out of that watery, intense, emotionally absorptive Scorpio moon, which can be really helpful for getting insights. But once the moon goes into Sagittarius, it'll be in the same sign as Mercury, moving into the same aspect dynamic that we've already been talking about. And so this waning cycle of the moon then also intersects into the same Mercury, Jupiter, Saturn combination that I've already been talking about. And so that becomes exact on Saturday, December 28th. This will be about 4:49 p.m. in Pacific time, so like 7:50 p.m. in Eastern time. Keep in mind, a mutable T-square means that it really emphasizes this feeling of being at a transition and being at a threshold and something ending and something beginning. And again, the fact that we have this mutual reception, though, between Mercury and Jupiter, it is helping it out some. And so, especially in the realms of Mercury and Jupiter, so research, communication, getting an idea and a sense of this bigger vision and the changes you want to really bring in this next year. This can be very powerful. It might also be a time of letting go of the things that you really are realizing are not going to work. And as this waning moon comes in here, really actively letting yourself let go of those things and starting to loosen up some of your attachment to things you're realizing need to be changing. Because at the same time this is going on, again, that Mars Pluto opposition is really building even more. And so just keep that in mind in terms of that Mars Pluto building tension there. The next day on Sunday, December 29th, the moon will be moving away from activating the Jupiter and Saturn into forming a really nice sextile aspect with Venus and then into a square aspect with Neptune. So this day is a nice waning moon day to really, if you can, it's a Sunday. If you're not working on this day, trying to take things easy and just kind of get into that nice meditative letting go of the previous lunar cycle. And if you're somebody that likes to make intentions for a new moon, this is a very powerful one the next day to do so because, of course, it's not just a new moon, it's a new moon coming at the very end of the year. So it really will give us a sense of New Year's resolutions coming in and that Mars Pluto opposition really intensifying again. It will be exact a few days later on January 2nd. And so as we come to the end of this week, we're not only coming to the end of a lunar cycle, we are coming to the end of the year and the Mars Pluto opposition building at the same time. And so it is possible you will be feeling some frustration and anger about one type of issue or another. It could be related to things in your personal life, things going on in the world. Whatever the case is, the more you can find outlets for your energy, whether through vigorous physical activity and exercise or through creative projects, whatever you can do to transmute that energy will be really helpful. And also let yourself use it as a form of guidance into how you are realizing you do need to make changes. And that can hopefully help you in setting intentions for the new year because it's going to be a really powerful year that we have ahead. If you'd like to have a consultation talking about the astrology coming in the year ahead, you can book a consultation with me in the link below. My books are open for January, and I'd love to have the opportunity to talk about how we can use it to be empowering for you. You can also find a link below to my Patreon community. There are monthly meetings as well as additional information I share there only to supporters on my Patreon. So please check that out. I'd also love it if you would like this video and subscribe. I'm just getting going making video content here, and there will be much more coming in the year ahead. Thank you for listening and enjoy this final week of the lunar cycle.